This parsha begins V'haya Eikev Tishmun. Now V'haya Eikev Tishmun translates, and it will be if you keep my words. Eikev is translated as if, and the Torah describes what will happen to Klal Yisrael if we keep the Torah. And all the Mefarshim, including Rashi, are bothered by the fact that if the Torah means to say if, then Eikev is a weird lashon. It should say im. So what's the understanding of V'haya Eikev Tishmun? Additionally, the Gemara tells us in Megillah that there are certain words throughout Tanakh that are codes for different emotions. V'haya is always a lashon simcha. Even the Mefarshim add that the word V'haya, Vav He Yud He, is the same first letters of Yismechu Hashemayim V'Saga La'aretz. The heavens and earth will rejoice. So this not only is Eikev strange, but it says V'haya Eikev Tishmun, and it alludes to a certain level of simcha that's found in this pasuk. That if you keep the Torah, there's a certain level of simcha that's found here more than other times that the Torah describes the obligation to keep Torah mitzvahs. So what's the lashon of simcha? So there's an amazing teaching for the Rishner. The Rishner explains that there's a teaching from the Arizal. He quotes the Arizal, and this Arizal is also discussed in the beginning of Tanya. The Arizal says that every Jewish neshama of all the Jews that are living right now, they all can be combined together to make one unit, one kaima shlema. B'derech mashal, in the way of a parable, not only are all these neshamas one unit, they sort of make up the image of a man. And what that means is the Baal Tanya discusses this the same way in a man. There are more vital organs and less vital organs. So too it is, all the neshamas of one generation, if you combine them together, there are more vital neshamas. Those are the neshamas of the tzaddikim that help the whole body function properly. But says the Rishner, not only is this true from the Arizal in one generation, this is also true in the history of Klal Yisrael. In the history of Klal Yisrael, if you would take every neshama that's ever lived, and every generation that's ever lived, it would combine one unit, again, b'derech mashal, of one image of a man. And he explains like this. The same way in a man, you have the eyes that have the ability to see, so too, there was generations many, many years ago that were able to see Hashem. The generations of prophets, the times of Nevuah, the mamish saw HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As time went on, the future generations continued, and they're no longer the eyes, they no longer can see, but they got to the heart, which is, while the heart can't see, but it could feel, it could sense, and so it has their emotions. And therefore, as time went on, maybe those generations no longer can see Hashem, but they felt His presence, they were aware of His presence. And then says the Rishner, as time went on further and further, the body goes down further and further and further, until you get to the feet, and the bottom of the feet, the heel. The heel doesn't see and it doesn't feel. It's the furthest away from the head. This generation is a generation we're living through. It's called the Eikev de Mashiach. Eikev de Mashiach means the last generation before Mashiach. But Eikev is also from a lashon Eikev, the heel. The heel is the most callous part of the body. It's the furthest away from the heart and the mind. However, says the Rishner, it's dafka that generation that doesn't see Hashem and that doesn't necessarily feel Hashem, but it's dafka in that generation that when they push themselves to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's a greater simcha in the eyes of Hashem than even in the previous dairas. You see, because in the previous dairas, while their service was greater in many ways, but there's a certain level of mesiras nefesh, there's a certain level of realness that you have when you're serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, dafka when those things are stripped away. Because how hard is it to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu when you see Him? And how hard is it to serve Hashem when you feel Him? But what's impressive and what shows a level of devotion and mesiras nefesh is to be able to serve Hashem when you're the heel, when you feel nothing and hear nothing, and you haven't met anyone who saw Hashem, and you haven't met anyone who even felt Hashem's presence in a real way, but you're still dedicated, and you're still serving Hashem to the best of your ability, to push yourself as much as you can to medaktek and Torah mitzvahs to the best of your ability. That's a level of mesiras nefesh. Says the Rishner, that's what it means in this parsha. V'haya, that V'haya is a lashon simcha of Yismechu Hashemayim V'Saga La'aretz, when Eikev, when the generation of Eikev Tishmun, when they keep Torah mitzvahs. Dafka, the generation of Eikev, V'haya Eikev Tishmun, that's dafka when the generation of the Eikev, the generation of the heel, dafka when they push themselves to serve Torah mitzvahs to the best of their ability, although it might seem insignificant compared to previous dairas, but because they're pushing it and they're doing their best in the situation that they were placed in, there's a level of simcha, the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, dafka in the door of Eikev Tishmun. The truth is, let me share with you a few words from the Rebbe Rashab. This is in Mamorim Tafresh Ayin Tes, in the Hoysafis of Daf Tafresh Ayin Ches. I'm going to post it to the main chat after. I think it's so kedai to see these words. The Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, said as follows. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu was the most humble of all men that ever lived. Ha'ish Moshe onav mikol adam asher pnei adam. Where did his humility come from? Says the Rebbe Rashab an amazing thing, and if it wasn't the Rebbe Rashab, you wouldn't be able to say this. But says the Rebbe Rashab, Moshe ra'a sifrei shel adam rishon. Moshe Rabbeinu saw every generation that will be, and he saw all the Jews that will be, and he saw what their lives would be like. V'rosh yadar b'ikvus Mashiach, and he saw that there will be a generation in the times of Mashiach, our generation, the heel, shloye b'masaga likis, that generation will not have the ability to understand Hashem well. They might think they understand it, but it's nothing compared to real Hasagas Elikis. And especially compared to the Hasag of Moshe Rabbeinu, this generation does not have the mind nearly to what they used to have. And they won't even have the heart like they used to. And Moshe Rabbeinu sees this dar, this generation in Queens, New York in 2026. They don't have the heart, and they don't have the mind, and they don't have the eyes, and they don't have that emotion. He says, what do they have? Kiyam mitzvah b'hoel mamish. All they'll have is to keep Torah and mitzvahs practically. V'gam ziyeh b'mesiras nefesh, and even that won't be easy. Shekam meniyas v'ikuvim b'guf nefesh. There'll be a lot of obstacles, a lot of anxieties, a lot of stresses, and our generation has, Baruch Hashem, so much gashmias and so much physical comfort, but you probably have never met a generation that's more uncomfortable mentally than ours. And Moshe Rabbeinu sees this, and he says, "V'yamdu neged kol mineya," and he says that generation will push themselves to overcome all these obstacles. V'yakayim mitzvahs mesiras nefesh, to do their best with mesiras nefesh. He'll see that heel, that it's dafka a heel, it's able to step over uncomfortable terrain, and it's dafka a heel that the entire body is resting on. And he sees this generation, v'roa shiflas ba'atzmai. And all of a sudden, Moshe Rabbeinu looks at himself and he says, I am humbled by them. Hayisun shem gedolim harbe mimenu, because he looks at the generation as greater than him. Astounding words from the Rebbe Rashab. The Moshe Rabbeinu says, I serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but I got to speak to him. Would I be able to serve him if I never spoke to him? Would I push myself to shul when I'm depressed? Would I put on tefillin if I have no desire to put on tefillin? Moshe Rabbeinu said, I'm impressed by that dar. That dar humbles me. That's what the Rebbe Rashab says. That's v'haya Eikev Tishmun. We're talking a dar that's Eikev is the Mashiach. We're talking a dar that's Eikev. We're in a dar that experiences this level of being a heel, of not necessarily feeling that closest to Hashem the way we want to, and not sensing His presence the way we probably would like. But it's dafka that generation that's able to walk through fire. And it's dafka the generation that Moshe Rabbeinu looks and says, I'm impressed by them. Because they're able to constantly keep walking without ever having experienced the things that the previous Darius experienced. No, shemachazak ourselves with this, to keep walking, to keep pushing. And ultimately, that heel will be reunited with the rest of the body. And mechazak ourselves that even if there are days where it seems tough, to remember Moshe Rabbeinu is watching us and he's saying, I'm impressed with him. And if that doesn't help you get to learn, Moshe Rabbeinu is watching. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, wow, look how strong those people are. Look how strong those soldiers are. Yeah, they get muddy and they get messy, but that's part of being a soldier. Mechazak ourselves to keep pushing. And that's chus, we should be zeicha to be reunited with the rest of the body with a gula mitzvah.